Mtrinity ongcwele wena omilontathu zinguThixo emnye. Ngawo lo mzuzu uThixo wethu siza phambi kwethrone yobabalo lwakho. Sikubulela, sikuncoma, sikudumisa. Sisithi Thixo wethu akakho uThixo ofana nawe. Enkosi Thixo wethu ngumluleki George. Enkosi Thixo wethu ngobomi bakhe. Into Thixo wethu abe yiyo waba yiyo ekhayeni lakhe, waba yiyo esizweni, waba yiyo ecaweni. Siyakubulela Thixo wethu ngomzekelo athe wawuthatha phambi kwethu sijongile. Indoda Thixo wethu ibesima kwi-convictions zayo. Indoda Thixo wethu ebe brave ukujongana nezinto ngezinto. Indoda Thixo wethu esifundisileyo into yokuba ebomini kubalulekile ukuba ube yi-disciplined cadre. Akakho Thixo wethu uThixo ofana nawe. Makuthi ke Thixo wethu nxa siqala lo msebenzi wena njengoThixo ube khona phakathi kwethu. Wonganyelwe nguwe lo msebenzi, uphathwe nguwe. Sibeka Thixo wethu zonke izipika ezizawuthetha apha. Makuthi konke Thixo wethu okuza kwenzeka apha kukhokhelwe nguwe njengoThixo. Thabatha indawo. Siyazi Thixo wethu okokuba usole ukhona wena njengoThixo. Yenje njalo ke Thixo wami ukulawula wonke lo msebenzi. Wenje njalo Thixo wami ukungcwalisa wonke lo msebenzi. Wenje njalo Thixo wethu ukungama phezu kwawo lo msebenzi. Ithemba lethu kaloku Thixo wethu likuwe. Sibeka Thixo wethu le family, sibeka Thixo wethu usisinomabhele kuwe njengoThixo. Sibeka Thixo wethu abantwana. Sibeka Thixo wethu bonke abathe balahlekelwa kumluleki. Thixo wethu mababotshwe nguwe, mabaqiniswe nguwe. Singapheka phika kaloku Thixo nxa singenawubheka kuwe. Singancedwa ngubana kaloku Thixo wethu nxa singenawuncedwa nguwe. Thabatha indawo ke ngoba uThixo bakho ungame phezu kwalo msebenzi. Egameni likaThixo Yise, uThixo Unyana, uThixo Moya Ingcwele enguThixo emnye. Haliphathwe ngobu ngcwele igama lakho. Kumkani wakho mabofike intando yakho mayenziwe emhlabeni nje ngokuba isenziwa ezulwini. Mawusiphe namhlanje isonka sethu semihla ngemihla. Usixolele izono zethu nje ngokuba nathi sixolela awasonayo. Thina ungasingenisi ekuyendweni, zisindise enkohlakalweni ngokuba ukumkani bobo bakhona mandla yenga wakhono nobungcwalisa bobo bakho gode kube ngunaphaka de amen. No kube kunapha gadem. Amen. Udumiso Mluleki kuyisena kuye
Thank you. You may be seated. Hallelujah. Thank you. Sibulela kakhulu into yokuba ifamily xa ibiqulunqa MEC la number ka-50 took into consideration the church choir. Families ezininzi xa sihamba le misebenzi yemingcwabo ye-COVID ignores the importance of the presence of the church. Kanti kuwe apha isikhakhamela sikanobhatyi. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to listen to a recorded version of the life and times of Mluleki George. Now for the obituary. Irekhodiwe ke saxa siyiva silandule siphakame. Thank you. Over to you, gentlemen at the back.
Mluleki George died on the 5th of January 2021 at the age of 72. Mluleki is survived by his mother, Nonasile George, his wife, Qonqotha George, Ibelekazi, their daughters, Vyokazi Bagazi, Uyeye, Ziyanda Ndebele, and Zele George, son-in-laws, grandchildren, Siamkela, Akama, Aluta, Avumile, Amahle, and Liasa. Brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, uncle and aunts, and the extended family. Mluleki was born on the 2nd of February 1947 to his parents, Ngana and Nonela George, at Qonqotha location, Kingdomstown. He attended Qonqotha Primary School, Ibekali Secondary School in Kingdomstown, and matriculated from Nafanya Nyaluza High School in Grahamstown. He studied Diploma in Personnel Management through UNISA and later BCom degree at Rhodes University, East London branch. In 1976, he married the love of his life, Qonqotha, and they were blessed with their first child in 1979. Chandisa, as he was fondly called by his clan name, played an integral part in the liberation struggle of our country towards the attainment of democracy and freedom. His resolve to rid our country of racism and oppression and to usher in new era of democracy was unflinching. He dedicated his life to the eradication of racial discrimination in sport and the creation of inclusive, non-racial sport in South Africa. As a member of the National Sports Council, NSC, during the unity processes of the early 90s, he was instrumental in the amalgamation of different sporting entities to create the national federations that we now have in South Africa. Mluleki began his career as a clerk in the Ciskei government in 1971. He served as Secretary of Council in 1973 and President of Border Rugby Union until his arrest in 1976, and was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment in Robben Island in 1978. He joined Kaibruk and Tai in 1982 as a personnel manager. He became a founder member of United Democratic Front UDF in 1983, founder member of National Sports Council in 1988, and a founder and executive member of National Olympic Committee of South Africa in 1989. He served as president of King Central and District Rugby from 1984 to 1986. Chandisa was elected president of UDF Border Region in 1986 and as president of Border Rugby Union from 1986 to 1991. He was also a member of the International Rugby Board from 1994 to 1997. Upon the unveiling of political organizations, he served as the executive member of the SACP Border Region in 1990. He was elected chairperson of ANC East London, King Williamstown region from 1996 until 1999. He also served as the chairperson of the ANC Yamatora region. He was elected president of National Sports Council, United Border Rugby Union from 1991 to 2001, and a vice president of South African Rugby Football Union, SARFU, from 1993 until 1998. He was again appointed as board member of South African Rugby Union in 2003. Mluleki became a member of Parliament in the National Assembly from 1994 until 2008. He served diligently in various positions, including member of the Portfolio Committee of Minerals and Energy, Correctional Services and Intelligence in Parliament from 1994 to 1999. He was elected chairperson of Parliamentary Portfolio Committee of Safety and Security from 1999 to 2004. He later served as the Deputy Minister of Defense of the Republic of South Africa from 29 April 2004 until 23 September 2008. Together with Muswari Kota and Basil Shiroa, he co-founded the Congress of the People, COPE, in December 2008 and served as the Treasurer General. Chandisa loved his family, his country, his sport, especially rugby, and his church. He served his church with distinction and was a devout Christian and Methodist. He was a spiritual man and involved in many church programs. He became the secretary of Methodist Church of Southern Africa Young Men's Guild, Mount Coast Circuit, since 2004. He was a disciplinarian and intolerant of people that did not respect time. He cried and laughed easily. There was nothing that was too big or too small for Chandisa. He said it as he saw it. He took no prisoners. Late in his life, he focused on his passion for farming. To his grandchildren, he was the greatest Adonku ever. To his children, he was an incredible father. Most of all, he was a loving husband to his wife. He was an active ANC member at 138 branch in King Town, Dr. D.W. Khubusana region. Siyakhulula uphumle ngwenu. Uqatho lona ulufezile. Ahamba ungajoki ngemva, Shangisa. Usikhonzele kwelikhaya lethu lokugqibela.
Thank you so much. You may be seated. Sibulela kakhulu ke na kulo mfana usifundele amagqabantshintshi ngobomi buka bawo uChandisa lo mfana uKeith Ngesi umkhwebunte obesenzela elibali ngokucacileyo esifundela lona. Kunjani nje xa uphulaphule elibali ubona insika zine zobomi besisikhakamela le 4x4 ubona umzabalazo ubona umbhoxo ubone inkonzo ubone love for family. Anything outside that zizinto nje ezona zinto xa uphulaphulele imbali zezo love for the liberation ne dedication ne liberation yokukhululeka kwabantu abamnyama ndawonye ne rugby nemidlalo yonke nje nenkonzo le yamawisi lamahle. One heart, one way, ndawonye ne family. Balulekile ke le institution kuthiwa ifamily kakhulu ngenye imini sawuncokola ngayo. Mandikhawuleze ke bethuna nditsibe ndiye kwi standby technical, nditsibe ndiye kwi tributes ezithunyelwe kwi family in a virtual way. In a virtual way. Z2 ezi tributes zakuzithatha ngoku zawuqala tabathe a tribute nayo which happens to be a virtual way. I'm hoping that he's on standby and then I'm happy if they are pre-recorded as well. A tribute kabawo Toby Kyamzash, Bao Toby Kyamzash, obey comrade, Mluleki George, particularly Ekuzabalazeni, Kwesport, and that's no one is Sakumbulana, Mhlasase City, no normal sport in an abnormal society. Sisuka apo, nokuzabalaza ngemidlalo. Sasikhokelwa ke ngoba uMluleki George aba nobawo umthobi Kyamzashi aba asasisithi no normal sport in an abnormal society. Ngabo ababeyibambile ngakumbi kwi-border region le. Okay, we are trying to link up live now with Tata Umthobi Kyamzashi, the special advisor to the Minister of Sport, Konukuze asgqithisele le tribute. All right, now imbali kabawuChandisa uzamana ukuthi ke kwezi tributes umane ufumana izinto that will take you way back in time, njengala obituary esithi waqala ukusebenza njenge-clerk apha eSiska. Yayisayinto enkulu leyo, bantu besuka kwamabhayi, abantu bayeka ubhampa ebhayi belamba baye eSiskayi bafike baqeshwe as ii-clerks. Umuntu ahlezi on 6 esiya emsebenzini njenge-clerk, amalady ehliqhina lase-zone 6 esiye ofisini echophisile kubhekwe emsebenzini. Aba bantu zii-clerks bexhonkqa beqeqeshwa belungiselelwa ingomso, kanti namhlanje bazaba yinxenye yokulawula kwabantu abamnyama eMzantsi Afrika. All right, are we ready, gentlemen? Thank you. All right. Now over to Ubawo Umtobi Kyamzash. Ongekhoyo phakathi kwethu. Over to you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Qonqotha Loc. I am here talking about a brother of mine, a friend and a leader, Mluleki George, aka Qonqotha. Qonqotha and I never discussed what role we would play in each other's funeral because we are not very emotional people. However, I know that Qonqotha would question me and say, so on that basis, I was happy to participate. What I do know that Qonqotha is a family person. He loved his wife Nokunda, and he loved his children, the three girls, Uvyoka, Esasiti Nahuyere, Uzianga, Istanguku, Nondondo Gane, Uko, Evanditi, we memorial service, Sesiboni Neuba Qonqotha is a man of many parts. It already been mentioned that he loved sport, he loved the church, he loved his family, and he loved his politics. And all those times he was away, where Mrs. Norma Belly would wonder why he leaving them. Today we can see that he was actually answering a call as a leader, around the leader of the community. All those days when the little girls were wondering why their father was not around, they should know that their father was making a contribution that will be remembered long after today. We therefore thank Mrs. Nongunda Namalekila Ukusherisha Naati Utagawa. He was truly one of a kind. The first one is that I was reading a book by Mluleki. It's called Beyond the Lady Among Them. It talks about Utata Olivata, Okulele Edizan. From that day he had Edizan, he went to capture the whole world. With a base at Qonqotha and capturing the whole world, a parallel do not escape me. In the same way, when I steal from the good book, John 15 verse 5, where it is said that I am the man, you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit. For without me, you can do nothing. This verse to me characterizes Mluleki, in the sense that he talks about an order, he talks about a hierarchy, in the same way as Mluleki was seen, not just as a rugby person, but as a sport person. That is why I was reminded about him through these two examples. There was an article in City Press in the old days which talked about an elaborate takeover of sport by the people known then in the article as the Qonqotha Loc. It looked so orderly, so hierarchical, where there was a leader, he called the Godfather, and the Godfather had several lieutenants. In athletics, we had Ngolombele and Banel Indani and Leonard Twilly. In football, we had Dennis Jordan and people like Alex Ambafrobi. In rugby, we had people like Ibrahim Patel. In cricket, we had people like Ombre, people like Ali Baba, and others. This gave the impression that all these things were done by design as a big plan of some brutal bonds in sport. Yet, it was purely coincidental that most of those names came from a particular region and spoke a particular language. That's the extent to which people thought there was order when there was none. Mluleki navigated the whole question of sport and politics quite well. Instead of dealing with the two not being able to be mixed, Mluleki said, it is not a matter of whether or not they should be mixed, but how they should be navigated. And he did a sterling job in doing that, where the political aspect of sport benefited the overall polity, and where the political aspect benefited the sporting aspect. As a result, the organization he led, called the National Sport Council, was referred to as the ANC interest group. In fact, it was even made more difficult when we started singing the line that we are members of the National Sport Congress and we are aligned. And therefore, people started talking about the politicization of sport. George and I met at the level of club rugby in the township of Ginsberg, where he was belonging to Head of Lion Club, and I was belonging to Star of Hope. For some reason, Head of Lion was seen as a UDF sympathizer, while Star of Hope was seen as a black consciousness supervisor. There were many derbies between these clubs, leading to some hilarious stories where at some stage, as they were playing, the ball got lost and the match had to be abandoned. Moving away from club rugby, we then progressed, he being the president and I being the secretary of the King and District Rugby Union, later renamed KCD. And in that context, we remember colleagues like Richard Fonte, Kaya Mabete, Mbulelo Konongo, all those people were George's lieutenants, and their loyalty to him was unbelievable. And King and District Rugby Union was such a powerful force in both the off-field and on-field activities. As our successes were evident at the district level, we were appointed to the provincial level, where he was president and where he led Border Rugby Union and delegated for the organization at SA Rugby Union level, which later became SARFU, which is known for the court case where it was SARFU versus the President of South Africa, where issues of governance in sport led to a commission which was challenged, and the matter went on to court with the President of the country being roped in, and where he was making a stand that he was not above the law. Those are the kind of memories that one has when one thinks about Mluleki and the sport of rugby, where at SARFU level, he was even appointed to chair the disciplinary committee of the organization. Whilst we were officials of rugby, we started seeing a pattern of Mluleki disappearing with nobody knowing where he went. It was much later that we realized that Mluleki was in London. And when we asked him what he was doing there, he said he was forming a big anti-apartheid sport organization, which was then called the National Sport Congress, later renamed the National Sport Council, via National Olympic and Sport Congress. These show the credentials of Mluleki as a sports person, as administrator of note, an administrator who gave opportunities to others, so they also became a realization of their own potential. We were wondering about this National Sports Council, why it was reporting to people like Barbara Masekela and Steve Chwete, who were in exile. And George told us in his humorous way that sport had to play a role in the liberation, especially during the time when organizations were banned in the country. He, together with people like Krish Naidu, Bill Jardine, Harry Naidu, Krish Magadush, and others constituted an interim NSC executive, which came in stark opposition to the then South African Council of Sport, which was known for the slogan of no normal sport in an abnormal society. The stance Mluleki took was quite different, and the Sarkozy's double standard resolution stated that matches must not be watched on television. Venues used by establishment sports should not be used. Private schools were not to be used, and Mluleki's contribution was to break those self-imposed limitations. With regard to no normal sport, he came up with a slogan that normalization of sport and normalization of society are not mutually exclusive. They can be conducted simultaneously. And secondly, in respect of the double standard resolution. He said, it is not the television in our houses or venues where we play or the schools where our children went to get their education. It was actually only what was discussed at those forums that was important. This was so radical at the time that people started wondering whether he was advancing the struggle or delaying it. But it was quite clear to Mluleki where he was going. As he is a leader, he led from the front, and he led us to the launch of the conference of NSA. And at that stage, it was clear that his appeal was across racial lines. So NSC was seen then, from then on, as an organization that is open to all South Africans, black and white. I often laugh when he sometimes gets carried away, as he was making a speech at the launch of the National Sports Congress. He all of a sudden thought about Welcome Mwita, who had just won a world title through the assistance of the National Sports Congress. And he left his opening speech to talk about Welcome Mwita. Such was the enthusiasm and passion that he had for his country, that nothing would hold him back. The National Sports Council had a program based on unifying sport along non-racial lines. With regard to rugby, this saw George meeting with Dr. Craven, and at one of those meetings, Craven asked Mluleki, do you know what you are trying to stop? Have you ever watched a chess match? And Mluleki said no. Dr. Craven was surprised that someone could be so dedicated in stopping something that he had never even watched. And George answered that it was because of the laws of the country that he was unable to witness a test match which he was advocating against.
Apologies,
so it went.
Apologies from the technical Pangasemba. I think they do have issues with connectivity. May we connect to Berry? Technical, can I ask you a favor? Before Simfage Moyeni to please emphasize the issue here, please. Emphasize the issue here, while we are connecting to mask. While we're connecting to Uberi, the Jessica MEC Kachangisa kwi UDF njengokuba sibona kwimbali yakhe into mango he is also a founding member ye UDF esikhumbulayo into ba yaqalwa ngo-1983 that by 1989 unbanning of the political organizations, 1990 the release of Nelson Mandela and other comrades and whatever. Sise radio siska ingela xesha thina. And le Jessica ejongene ne sport ikwajongene ne media and entertainment such that we were conscientized natuba sibe ngabasasazi that are moving with the times. Abasasazi abarhabulileyo abayaziyo into kokuba lo mbuso wamabhulu uyawa oMandela babuyile and usasazo lwethu, even the writing of the news needed to be sensitive and relevant to that. Is Barry on standby? I will pin anybody pie today. Is Barry on standby? Right, Barry, you have 3 minutes. Over to you. Barry is the president of SASCOC. Barry Hendricks, over to you.
Mluleki, I would like to acknowledge Mama George and family and offer SASCOC's condolences on the loss of such a great sports giant. It is seldom that one gets to personally encounter a person of such small stature but a large presence, who in his distinguished life changes millions of people's lives for the better and redefines the perception and direction of a country's sports policy and structure. Mluleki George is such a person. It is a great honor and a privilege to pay tribute and to convey my respects to one of the perhaps finest sports administrators that our country has produced. A South African whose life was focused on building the national sports environment through his political and sporting endeavors. We are here today because we, like many South Africans, owe a debt of gratitude to a giant who, through his unwavering, determined, unapologetic leadership, that created a new, unified beginning for sport in our country. That is why we are here, to celebrate his life. I was fortunate to start my relationship with this giant while a student at Rhodes University. He had been smuggled into the university with Mrs. George by the black student movement. They were hidden in the student dorm, and when the time was right, collected and walked to the lecture room, where he described the changing South African sports environment and the need to form a new unified structure that encapsulated sports people from all walks of life and from all corners of the African society. Despite the obvious danger, he and his wife thought it was important to speak directly to the students. That day inspired me to expand my responsibility and role of sport in this country. I'm forever thankful for that first encounter. Through his further endeavors to create a new sports structure, he in turn further impacted on the lives of many people and contributed to the unification of many sports structures. Here are some of his achievements that has already been mentioned. President of the Border Rugby Union, founding member of the United Democratic Front, founding member and first president of the National Sports Congress and later National Sports Council, founder and executive member of the National Olympic Committee, the forerunner of SASCOC, first president of SAFA, first president of rugby. Mr. George therefore played an integral part in the unification has formed other leaders in this country. SASCOC, on behalf of the membership and the sports movement, pays tribute to one of our most revered and iconic sports administrators and leader. There are several national sports federation presidents who have also paid tribute. Donnie Jurgens, president of gymnastics, says, "Let us always contribute." Remember his contribution he made to sports, and we must make sure that we honor his legacy. From the president of SA Climbing, as a South African stalwart and a sports visionary, his influence on South Africans and our sporting movements was immense. The many different roles he played in uniting and guiding the democratic sports movement was amazing and is appreciated. Mark Alexander, president of rugby, he was a very principled man, a principled and skilled negotiator, and he will always be remembered for his unselfish fight for human rights and the dignity of all people of South Africa. Cricket South Africa states, cricket in South Africa is indebted to Mr. George, whose commitment to non-racial sport in a unified South Africa is well documented. He was a fine South African who made a more significant contribution to public life. May our endeavors on the field of play and off it be worthy of his memory. He inspired us to do so, what we have to do now. The president of SAFA, Danny Jordan, states he would like to express his sincere condolences to the football family, the George family and friends. This is a major loss to the whole of South Africa. He led SAFA to its first elections and has paved the way to create a unified football structure in the country. So what did Mluleki George teach us? His principle and his values of non-racialism, human rights, honesty and bravery. His unselfish approach to sports unification and development, his unmatching negotiating skills. He was a gift to us, and we are lucky for him to have shared his time with us. We continue to strive to work towards his vision and ideals. We will work to entrench and grow his legacy. We will do so through hard work to further grow and develop the sports sector of society that we so dearly love. Through the recognition of his legacy and implementation of specific sports programs that SASCOP will inaugurate, his indelible contribution to the sports movement from international to grassroots level will never be forgotten. Hamba kahle leader, rest well. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Sibulela kakhulu, Barry deliver kakhulu as tributes from the various federations. Sibulela kakhulu ke Londao. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get a tribute from the political, particularly kuba sisazi into kokuba uba uChangisa sizabalaze naye, and okay, slight changes, apologies. We're going to start with family now, and then we will do political later. All right? Okay, now, zawucela ke phakwi family uThembakazi George asondele ezinye ke zi-recorded i-tributes apha kwi-family. Zamcela ke umama uThembakazi George asondele kudabawo wabantwana ke nona bethu. That's right, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Mandibulise nam kuba efundisa abakhoyo. Ndibulise ku Honorable Msimvoko. Ndibulise kwi family yasekhaya. Ndibulise naye wonke umuntu okhoyo, all protocol observed. It's hard to believe that today we are bidding farewell to our brother. He was not only a brother to us, ebengutata. Sisolekele ngutata wethu ngo-1987, nge-25th ka-August. And usoleka kwakhe kwi-families zabantu abamnyama, it's automatic that inkulu must take over. And in this case, ubhuti ebesoloko esithi xa sihleli sihlangene, athi wabizwa ngutata before asweleke, wathi kuye, Mluleki, uzugcina abantwana bam. And whenever ethetha lento, he became emotional. Afuna ulila. Ndingayazi ba yintoni na kangaba. I think I missed ukubana ndiyibuza bana, what is it that makes you cry xa uthetha lento? Ubhuti usifundisile indlela yosiphatha, usifundisile yonke into. and sifuna ubulela irole ayithathileyo kubomi bethu. I cannot say we are these successful people because measure ye success iyadependa kumntu nomntu, but akakho umbhuti umntu amshiya engqiba estratweni. Sonke ekhaya sinendawo zethu, umntu uyavuka ixoxo nexoxo liyazixhumela. So sifuna ukuthi ngalonto enkosi bhuti, you were not just brother to us, you were a father, you were a mentor, you were a supporter, you were a critic, and ebeyibond edibanisa ifamilies zamangwevu. Ifamily yamangwevu inkulu kakhulu, ikhona kwaChachu, ikhona lapha kwaQonqotha, but ubhuti ebeyilidisha zonke ezifamily ezilidisha. So ngalo mazwi ndithi ndiyambulela kakhulu. Asinawo amazwi esinokuthi siwathethe sibulele. Manibulele kwakhona uMambele nabantwana bakhe ngokuba bamshare ubhuti nathi. We cannot take that for granted because in other families ayenzeki ngohlobo umuntu athanda ngalo, abe umuntu inhliziyo yakhe isebantwaneni bakokwabo but abe enengxaki. Lala ngoxolo Sikhomo uyojoyina ngoku utata wethu ungundana wayisithi ke xa thetha ngaye kudaso ikandana, ayojoyina ozameni, uyojoyina uKhatamile. Rest in peace. Thank you.
Enkosi kakhulu ke Matshalisa, siyabulela kakhulu. Sikula cluster ngokubethuna ye family tributes from siblings zakhe abantu akhule nabo njengokuba sivile nje apha kuMatshalisa, and then siye kubatshana, sisuke kubatshana siye kubazukulwana, sisuke kubazukulwana siye ku-tribute yabantwana bakhe, sisuke ku-tribute yabantwana bakhe siye ku-tribute kaMambele. Sikulo cluster ngoku, i-cluster ye-family tributes. And that is why bendi-worried virtually ngathi zithatha ixesha elide nje, kwafuneka sivane technical, sibe nendlela yeskera kwezi technical. Iskera siyafuneka bazalwane. Yeah. And then emva kwale cluster sikuyo siye ku-cluster yezopolitiko kulapho kuzophakama khona MEC. Emva kwaleyo i-cluster siye ku-cluster yenkonzo, the handover kuJola. For us to push a cluster yenkonzo, including the sermon, and then indawo siphinde sizibuyisele ekhaya for izaziso nombulelo. So you can see there's a lot to do, and yet we don't have time. Okay, so funa ucengacengana ke nathi sonke ngoba kuwe umuntu omkhulu ebesizuza sonke kumthunzi wawo. Into nayo funeka sicingelane nesicingelane. Mandicele ke ngoku on behalf of abatshana sidlalelwe a recorded tribute kaThandos. On behalf of abatshana sidlalelwe a recorded tribute kaThandos. Over to you.
Othethayo sakuhlala sikhumbula imisebenzi yakho, your love, your guidance.
On behalf of abatshana uThandos othethayo nosoloko siqwaqwada to the right direction, imisebenzi yakho, abantu ke bathi your love, your guidance, the comrade kuthi we saw a father esikhulu. Why into yonke uthi to the right direction singabatshana bakho, abantu ke bathi xa kuthiwa the comrade kuthi we saw a father uyama noba into yonke that's what we have done. I'm talking from my heart, you led by example. Xa kuthiwa silahlekelwe kodwa ke sinethemba uThixo noba akuvumi uzawuba nathi. I'm talking to feel up your shoes zinkulu kakhulu kodwa ke sinethemba lento yokuba uyawuhlala wena unathi uhleli ezintliziyweni zethu. Sawuhlala sikuthanda kakhulu. To fill up his shoes zinkulu kakhulu. Kodwa ke Tata, on behalf of Abachana, Uthandos othethayo.
Thank you so much. Siyabulela kakhulu. Mandicele ke ngoku abazukulwana uSiya noAqhama bona beza ke live. Izani ke bafana bam. Nizawabona ngabafana banomahluko. uSiya lo noAqhama udadewabo. Isondelani ke bantwana bam ngabazukulwana aba bakabawutshangisa. Ikhona nechorus apha enkonzweni yokusondeza nje abantwana.
Kwabanye abantu ubizwa Mluleki, kwabanye abantu ubizwa comrade, kwabanye abantu ubizwa utata, kodwa kuthi tatomkhulu, you are somebody who always was a figurehead, who was somebody we loved. You are our grandfather. Tatomkhulu, you taught me the importance of staying true to my fight. You are a man who taught me to stand strong to my beliefs, no matter how impossible or far they seemed. Your mannerisms, your life were always a clear indication of the beauty, the power, and the strength that the Lord can have in our lives through people we love. I stand here whilst we congregate, and I know firmly that there are many people coming together through various parts in our country, joining in our celebrations. There are many people coming together, mourning the loss of an influential figure in their lives, mourning the loss of a hero. Today, our country mourns a hero. Tina, we mourn our loved one. We mourn utatomkhulu, somebody who raised me for the first years of my life. Your smile, the debates you had with me and Waluta, and the straight-up comforting stance will forever be in our soul. Kwinhliziyo zethu, xa siphefumla nguwe. Ngawe, xa ndilala, ndiyayazi ukhona. You watch over me in spirit, and even though I never got to say it, you are always my angel, even before you became one. I'm going to start.
Tatomkhulu, I will always miss you, but I have so many fond memories to hang on to. Like all the times we would watch TV together with me lying on your stomach, using it as a pillow. Or the times you would take us out to Spur, just to spend some alone time with us. Abazukulwana bakho. I'm going to miss your laugh and how you would always make jokes. Your guidance and love will carry me through the end of my days. With you, Tatomkhulu, there was always a special bond between us, and for the longest time, I could boast about you calling me your only granddaughter, and that you always made me feel important and loved. This title made me different and unique, and it was something only shared by the two of us, me and you. This was obviously taken away from me by someone else, Omyumtana, who shall not be named. Even though I lost this title, you always found a way to make me feel important, and I got a new title as the eldest granddaughter instead. A part of me feels sad that I never got to say goodbye, that I never got to see you one more time. But another part of me knows that you are still here watching over us. We love you, Tatomkhulu. You will forever be in our hearts.
Thank you. Enkosi kakhulu bantwana bami. Siyabulela kakhulu. I think it's important about Bishop indoba njengokuba siphila nje sibhala incwadi ngobomi bethu kubantwana bethu. Sibhala incwadi ngobomi bethu kubazukulwana bethu. Khona ukuze ngenye imini babe kanti bashiyeka beobserve i-legacies ezithile ezibakhileyo ebomini babo. I'm going to hand over kubantwana bakhe. They pre-recorded, fortunately, tributes zabo, and so Zianda, I think I'm going to hand over to you, and then emva koko ikhona nenye ezawulandela ekazanele. Thank you so much.
This is a tribute from Uvyokazi Sibulele Bangazi, the eldest daughter. This is a tribute from Uvyokazi Sibulele Bangazi and the eldest daughter, Dombizianda George, Katata Uchangisa, and Uqolo Dombizianda George, the second born, Katata Uchangisa no Mama Umampel. Yeah. Where do we start to speak about Utata as Tata being late? But we will try. Utata to us was and will always be a loving father. Tata loved us so much, and Tata to us was a present father. He had so much time for us. And sometimes maybe it's something that we took for granted growing up. As busy as Tata was, but he always made time. I'll reflect on, I think for both of us, all our friends know Utata personally. Like all our friends have interacted with Utata at some point or the other, because Tata was always there. Be it at school, Tata was always like showing up throughout our lives. And I think something that I took for granted was, even when I was at high school, Utata would be there. Utata would come from Cape Town, land and come and visit and spend time just talking to me. And I think we both had that experience of Utata always being there. I think Uyeye, as we call my older sister, Yeye's friends, all of them, some of them not that are no longer here, but they had very fond memories of Utata, because Tata would be there. They would come to the house. Tata would be there to crack jokes, and he knew all our friends. And sometimes he'd forget names, but he knew. He'd say, "La chomi yako yase Dimbaza, la chomi yako yase Ginsberg." And I mean, I think he was that kind of a loving father. I know Yeye's friends would be there, and Tata Abumane said, "Abantwana bangagodukiyo, bagodukela apa." Ithini into yabo, because we had Ugcez stayed down the road from our house, but Ugcez ugodukela ekhaya, and Tata Abumane buzba, "Lo ntwana ungagodukiyo athatha uGceza goduswe same day litshona ilanga uGceza is back. So yeah, that was utata for us. And I remember even when we were growing, when we were much younger, so my little sister and I, Uzanele, we would go to the ANC offices from time to time, and every time we would be there, would get there, people would be sitting doing nothing, literally, like just chilled. And then the minute Utata comes, people start being busy, like people just started being busy. And I didn't understand about what is going on. People would start be busy yonkinto, and Utata was known there as Ustalin, and I couldn't get this thing Stalin ba. Hey, nanku Stalin veske nje once kuthiwa nanko uStalin abantu baba busy. But I came to learn at a later stage that Utata was a worker, a doer. So that I wanted things done, and wanted things done properly, and he wanted things to be, done the right way. Utata knew how to manage us. So growing up, I always thought Uyeye is Tata's favorite. On the other side, Uyeye always thought I was Tata's favorite. So Tata had that way of managing us, but I think we both had a special relationship.
So akho nto sinokufolta ngayo. Usithandile, wathanda nabantwana bethu, wathanda nabayeni bethu, and your family at large. Oh, I feel for Mampele, because you've treated Mampele as iqanda, something that we didn't understand, but that you did up until the end, and for that we are grateful. Siyakhulula Changisa, kona kubuhlungu, but sithi singabantwana bakho khonto ungasifundisanga yona, wasifundisa necawa, wasifundisa nokuthandaza. So ngalamazwi sithi phumla ngoxolo Changisa, siyakukhulula ngenhliziyo zethu zonke. Enkosi.
Nkosi izintombi, ikhona ke ekantondo wakhe Uzanele. Ndizawucela into yokuba Okay, we're getting ready for that one. Lovely. Okay. Let's listen to Egazabele. Thank you. Over to you.
Dada, usikhulisile, wasithanda, wasifundisa, usikhulisile, wasiqeqesha, wasithanda, usenzela into okokubana xa kufika usuku, abantwana bakho babe bekwazi uzimela, usenzela into okokubana xa kufika usuku, ndiyabulela tata, abantwana bakho babe bekwazi uzithanda ngayo, wathanda abantwana, ndiyabulela tata, wathanda indlela usithande ngayo, wathanda abantwana, ndibulela nento okokubana wathanda nomama wethu ukuba simoyike, ndibulela nento okokubana usifundisile ukuba simoyike uYehova. Ndibuhlungu tata, kodwa ndiyawukhulula umphefumlo wakho. Kuba ndiyayazi uba kodwa ndiyawukhulula umphefumlo wakho. Kuba ndiyayazi uba undenzele yonke into ibisemandleni akho. Tata, ndiyayazi tata into okokubana wasithanda, ubuhleli ukhona ebomini bam. You celebrated all my achievements. Into okokubana xa kufika ibincinci into abantwana bakho babe bekwazi ibingekho ncinci kuwe. Ndiyabulela undikhuthaza indlela osithanda into zingenzekanga ngendlela ebendifuna zenzeke ngalo. Wathanda nomama wethu. Undifundisile tata okokubana into elungileyo nengalunganga uYehova. And throughout your life, you continued to try to show us the right way. No matter where I was, I always knew that I have a father. I always knew that if I need you, you will be there for me. I always knew that I have a home. Ndiyabulela tata. You celebrated all my achievements. I was your last born. I was your last born. And you indulged me. And you tried everything in your power to give me the world. I can't begin to say all the things. And throughout your life, you continued to try. But I am grateful to have had you for this long the right way. And I am grateful, no matter where I was, to have had a father. I always knew that I have a father who loved God and his family with all his might. That if I need you, you will be there for me. I will try to teach your grandson I have a home. All the lessons that you taught me, that I know you would have loved to teach him yourself. And I'll always remind him how much you loved him, how much you loved us. I will miss talking to you. I will miss your jokes. I will miss getting a hug from my father. I will miss knowing that you are there. I will miss seeing you when I come home. I don't have the words to thank you for the way you raised me and loved me. I guess the only thing I can say is that ndiyakuthanda tata, ndiyakubulela tata, lala ngoxolo tata.
Thank you. Ngamaxesha abuhlungu anje apho uye ucinge ingoma yenkonzo ube nentuthuzelo. Ibuhlungu into yokufika kokufa umuntu ekude noThixo. Ungazuyivumele loo nto into yokokuba kufike ukufa ukude namadinga kaThixo. Ngoke siza kufumana a tribute nayo is pre-recorded. Technical, stand by for a tribute Kamambele.
umuntu angade acinga into yoba sibaninzi kanti sithi sobabini. Xa sicula iculo lamawesile unumber 244 nonumber 163, especially the last verse, ibiba ngathi sibaninzi sitsho sobabini ngendlela emangalisayo. Sasicinga into yokokuba ndawuhamba kuqala kunawe. Thixo akathanda njalo. Zulu, ndingabhala incwadi ngawe, ndingabhala incwadi ngathi sobabini, ifundwe ngabantu. Nangoku ndixolile ngoba umke phambi kwam, ndikubambile, ndakukhulula, ndathandaza, ndakuxelela ukuthi iminqweno yakho ndiza kuyiphumeza njengoko ubufuna njalo. Rhudulu, lala uphumle, usebenzile Sikhomo, walwila amadabi enkonzweni kaThixo, usilwela inyaniso. KwiSouth Africa yonke umi enyanisweni. Andinakukugqiba Tshangisa, kodwa ndifuna ukuthi may your soul rest in peace. Sawudibana kwelizayo. Ndim inkosikazi yakho, uMambhele obumthanda kakhulu. Ndawuhlala ndikuthanda nanini na Tshangisa. Nkosi.
Thank you so much. Siyafuna ubulela kakhulu kubantu bebethabatha inxaxheba kule segment ye program leke ye family tributes. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on to another segment, the one just before the final, and that is that of his political career. And it gives me great pleasure to have to request the ANC Provincial Deputy Chair and MEC of Finance, Economic Development and Environmental Affairs, MEC, the Honorable Mluleki Mvoko, to come forward and present a tribute. Qonqotha Mluleki George. MEC, over to you.
Enkosi mphathi nkqubo, ndiyazi noko kuyatshiwo apha emngcwabeni ukuthi enkosi Bhutiza, chaplain umfundisi uvasi, ubishop, abefundisi neenkokheli zenkonzo ezikhoyo apho, usapho lwakaGeorge, umama uGeorge, izihlobo nezalamane, mourners and comrades who are joining us on virtual platforms, the leadership of the ANC-led alliance, the leaders of the sporting fraternity, players and supporters of rugby, umuntu wonke ozokhunga nathi apha namhlanje, ndiyazibulisela ngale ntsasa. Mphathi nkqubo, andizokumosha kakhulu kuba ixesha lisityile. uyazi ukuthi buyaqonda ba ndifuna uqhawe kosukundiqhawule ndiyayivumela loo nto. Mphatheli Mqutyo, ndithunywa yinkulumbuso yeliphondo lethu ukuba ndizokwenza intetho yephondo ngobomi beli qhawe lilele ukuthula uComrade Mluleki George. Ebenqwenela ukuba lapha naye abekho ngokwakhe, nto nje kukho umsebenzi onjengalo sikuwo ekhayeni lakhe ubeka umzala wakhe obelixhoba lentsholongwane ye-COVID-19. Ngaphandle kwamathandabuzo, intlungu eniyivayo nileli khaya lakwaGeorge iviwa sithi sonke kwi-African National Congress, kuba uComrade Mluleki George ebelilungu lethu lombutho wethu iminyaka emininzi yobomi bakhe. And I must add, uComrade George uyisebenzele i-African National Congress. Elaa gwijo lithi i-ANC yasetyenzelwa lithetha ngamaqabane afana naye. Loo nto ke yonke ithi silikhaya le-ANC silahlekele lulungu losapho lwethu. Silila nani bosikhoma, silila nani botshangisa bozulu bomhlatyana. Ubunzulu benxeba lenu siyabuva nathi. Sifuna ukugqithisa ngakumbi amazwi ovelwano nentutuzelo kunkosikazi wakhe uMampele, abantwana bakhe uVuyokazi, uZiyanda noZanele, abazukulwana bakhe kanye nabakhwenyana bakhe. Anga uThixo anganomeleza athomalise intlungu yenu. All of us here today, we are connected by our common love and appreciation for the contribution Comrade George made in our country. Thus, we did not hesitate to ask President Cyril Ramaphosa to accord him a special provincial funeral. This status of a send-off is reserved for South Africans who have made an extraordinary contribution in our country, and Comrade George falls into this category of luminaries. He has earned his stripes. Sivile xa umuntu ethetha ebonakalisa inxaxheba ayidlalileyo ukukhula kwelizwe lethu. Comrade George belonged to a special generation of freedom fighters who were courageous and fearless, a rare breed who were disciplined and focused to the task of fighting for our liberation, who risked their lives for our revolutionary cause. He was part of revolutionaries who were willing and able to make our yearning for a freedom a reality, an organic intellectual of the people, a campaigner, a rooted mass-based cadre of our movement, produced and honed in the theater of the liberation struggle, living side by side with the toiling masses of our people. Changisa had immersed himself, heart and soul, deep into the liberation struggle from an early age. Together with many comrades of his generation, they took the decision to bring their productive capacities at disposal of the people for the rest of their lives. One of such luminaries is Comrade Mluleki George, to whom we say, fare thee well, Mgwefu. It is clear from the accounts we have heard from the comrades of his generation that he was a reliable and dependable comrade. Awunoyano comrade uGeorge Mfazweni, knowing fully well that he would not leave you wounded behind the enemy lines. Comrade George would not have attracted to him people and exerted influence if he was not an honest leader. The tasks that were bestowed to him by the movement in a very difficult era where people were turned against the ANC indicate that he was a trustworthy cadre and leader of our movement. Changisa was a battle-tested revolutionary whose application of theory and practice has been observed through known and well-documented operations of the mighty sectors of the gigantic army of the liberation movement. Comrade George joined the struggle for our liberation because he had compassion for the daily struggles of the masses of our people. The segregation in sports, the oppressive laws of the apartheid regime, and generally the poor living conditions our people were subjected to is what attracted him to the ranks of our movement. If it was not for his compassion for the masses of our people, he would have stayed away, far away from politics, and enjoyed the perks of working for the Siskai government, like many other people who occupied positions kula nomkokwana wehulumende wase-Siskai. But Comrade George decided to be on the side of the masses of our people. He chose a bigger cause and paid a heavy price for his choice when he was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment on Robben Island in 1978. He came out of Robben Island in 1983, fired up to take the struggle forward and reactivate the comrades from a lull that followed the aftermath of the 1976 uprising. He set about doing contacts with many activists of that era, some of whom were in various sporting codes. This clearly demonstrated one certain message, that he had been given a specific instruction by the High Command on Robben Island and spared no moment to deliver on that instruction. If the apartheid regime thought they had broken his revolutionary spirit through that 5-year sentence, they had another thing coming. They created a revolutionary monster for themselves, because after his release in 1983, Comrade George wasted no time in getting back to the struggle for our liberation by becoming one of the founding members of the United Democratic Front and occupied leadership roles in numerous organizations that were used to promote the cause of our struggle for freedom. This speaks largely to his courageous trait. How many of us would have spent 5 years in jail, away from our families, and get back to political activities without any breather? When we say generation, the generation of Comrade George was a blessing to our country, we mean exactly that, because they were selfless. They were the true embodiment of the democratic government's principle of Batupile, which means putting people first, a committed cadre of the people. Changisa was a peace-loving combatant who would find time to commit himself to try find solutions to challenges afflicting tension-ridden quarters of our revolutionary movement. Some will remember the divisions in East London of the 2 youth formations, the 2 women formations in the same region, and the 2 teachers' union formations. Changisa will spend long hours of time interacting with the affected comrades in the quest of achieving unity of the masses. Awade bathi abanye abantu indoda itheni le iphakathi kwabafazi ngeendaba zabafazi. He would laugh at this and say, no leader sufficiently obsessing with the success of his organization would achieve his objective without maximum unity of the ground forces. Truly to him, unity was sacrosanct. He was brave to pursue his convictions. He would engage frankly and honestly about them, win or lose his argument, but he would not hide away views merely to be in good books with everyone. He cherished the principle of an accountable leadership and government. He did not like the fact that branches would only serve for elections and conference purposes. No government work would deter Changisa to go to branches and interact with those branches to work for the people. A disciplinarian and punctual comrade, he detested the conduct of late coming. He would say, "Sakutibana ngo-7," knowing that the actual venue of that meeting will be elsewhere at a different time. Like wena ufike emva, uyafika sekumkile, because it was a huge security risk, as it might expose those arriving late to the vultures, and more importantly, that would deprive the meeting of the contribution of those arriving late. He would go on and say, imagine that we had been sending apologies during the struggle days. This country would have never been free. Not only was he a sports fanatic, but the sporting terrain was among the key strategic sites of the struggle through which he utilized under the repressive state machinery of the apartheid government, inclusive of its Bantu stands. Under those conditions, Changisa crisscrossed the former Ciskei and Transkei and the old Victoria East, Albany and Eastern Cape regions, with his main base being in the border region. To make it more serious, he operated largely from Zuricha Township, which was the capital of the Ciskei Bantustan, with comrades like Richard Fonte. Courageous people are also famous for making tough decisions, even if they are unpopular. At a time, he felt the liberation movement was veering off its track according to his own views. He took the decision to leave it. Many were surprised and disappointed, regardless of whatever disagreements that may have existed, but all respected his decision. For the first time, he went to the National Parliament on a different ticket. He was vociferously critical of the leadership. He was no pleaser of anyone. He indeed knew that the ANC was a living organism within his veins and was perfectly convinced that the ANC had turned the corner of self-correct. He had voluntarily decided to rejoin the ANC and had remained one of his loyal, committed, and disciplined members at the time of unfortunate passing out of this world. The book about the life of Comrade Mluleki George will not be complete without a chapter on his passion for sports. I hear he was a formidable rugby player during his time, which speak volumes about his dedication to the sport of rugby as an administrator. Had it not been for the persistence and influence of administrators such as Comrade Mluleki George, the late Reverend Stofile, and the late Mr. Silas Nganunu, who laid the foundation for transformation in rugby, we would not have witnessed a Black Siyamthanda Kolisi lifting the World Cup as the captain of the Springboks in 2019. It was through their hard work of many years that our young black talent was on display in that Rugby World Cup final in Japan. It gives us a profound sense of gratitude that Comrade George lived to witness that moment of brilliance when Makazole Mapimpi and Lukanyo combined for a well-worked try at the Rugby World Cup. After all, those two players come from the region Comrade George led as a rugby administrator. I'm certain he enjoyed that particular World Cup victory more than the ones before. Now that our stalwart has departed, we must draw lessons from the life he led. His compassion for the people of South Africa was unmatched, as many speakers have attested. Meaning, therefore, we have a duty to fulfill the commitments we make to the people of our province during each election. Comrade George was an agile leader who was rooted amongst the masses. This is the ethos we must emulate to solve the challenges of our people. For instance, we must show agility in the state to assist our people when they are affected by natural disasters. People should not go for months displaced from their homes by natural disasters. Our processes in government must be flexible. Mluleki George and his generation did not have sticky fingers when they were in the public office. The question we must ask then is, where did we learn this foreign behavior of abusing political positions of responsibility were entrusted with by the ANC for personal gain? Comrades, forget that the ANC is a revolutionary organization, and as ANC members, we're expected to be above reproach. We have no business engaging in conduct that tarnishes the image of the ANC in the first place and drag the name of the ANC into our own personal troubles with the law. Former President Thabo Mbeki, sometime last year, said, we must revive comradeship in the movement. He said those who do malfeasance in the state and those who support their conduct by not calling them to order are not comrades, but are just ladies and gentlemen. He correctly argued that comrades would see to it as their task to make sure that we effect the transformation of our country in all respects, close quote. Whereas, ladies and gentlemen are only concerned about self-enrichment, he warned that comrades do not behave like that. Ngoko ke sinoxanduva lokukhusela igama lombutho kumanene namanenekazi. The ANC is a righteous organization, but indeed righteous leaders and comrades, because if leaders and comrades are not righteous, we'll continue to see the ANC name dragged in courts of law for the personal misdeeds of its leaders and comrades who wrong our nation and hide behind the name of the ANC. So mona sithetha ngale mvuselo ye-ANC ingakumbi xa sibeka kwikhaya lokugqibela amalungu ombutho abegatyene nezinto eziphuma ecaleni kuba sifuna ukuvuselela izazela nobuqabane esasinabo ku-ANC ngaphambili. Comrade Mluleki George fought a good fight. Comrade Mluleki George finished the race. Comrade Mluleki George kept the faith. Here lies a well-rounded citizen of this country that has contributed tirelessly to extricate it out of the bondages of oppression, underdevelopment, and racism. Siyabulela kusapho lwakhe namangwevu jikelele ngokusiqoqela lentonga yomnquma khona ukuze kukhululeke zonke inhlanga zelizwe lakowethu. Egameni likaRhulumente sibamba ngazo zozibini ngokubongelwa eliqhawe, ngokubolekwa eliqhawe elazinikela ukuphilela elingcono ilizwe kunelo akhulela kokulo. Hamba kakuhle mkhonto. Si-ANC namahlakani ethu sithi phumla ngonaphakade Tshangisa, phumla ngonaphakade Sikhomo, igalelo lakho emzabalezweni alisokuze licime. Ndiyabulela.
Thank you so much. MEC Mlungisi Mvoko, delivering a powerful tribute from the political contributions of this fallen hero. Sizawunikezela kwinkonzo ke ngoku. La 1.5 hour bendinikiwe ngoku ndia ikekelela kula 30 minutes yakho Jola. Khona ukuze sibe kanti besi compliant ngoba siqale ngo9:30 basinogqiba ngo11 kwawuchiwo kuthiwe siye sawuphatha kahle lo msebenzi. Ndifuna nambulela bethuna kwifamily belekazi nabantwana bakho into kokuba nindibizi. For me it was quite personal ngoba ukugqibezela nje la ndawana sathi kusasazo EUDF yes organizer Sunday Association of Democratic Journalists sisebenza no comrade Kolele Tetheleli, comrade Cindy Swagomba kwi-Association of Democratic Journalists sirhabula le transition ka-1990. Yeke ke leyo basahamba saxakana noGqozo owandivalelayo kuba ndandingafuni ukuthowisha lento ba eqale owakhe umbutho owayesithi African Democratic Movement esibuyisele emva. It was comrades like Smarts Ngonyama and Mluleki George who negotiated for my release uGqozo endivalele eMdantsane for 2 weeks in solitary confinement. Lingangaveli igama likabhutiza kwi-political prisoners. Akukho nemvlophu na MEC kuthiwe bhutiza nantsi imvlophu wazabalaza sakubona. Sondela Jola ndinikela ngoku kwinkonzo bethuna khona ukuze iqukumbele lo msebenzi omhle onesihomo nesidima nesithozela ngolhlobo kaQabane uMluleki George. Over to you umfundisi lo secam kwam mfundisi Thamsanqa Mdingi and nguJola lo ngumphankomo nguQengepa.
Nkosi Bhutiza Nkosi Mphathi Nqubo siyabulela kakhulu. Ndiyabulisa ku MEC Mvoko nokwangusekela sihlalo wombutho wesizwe African National Congress MEC ndiyabulisa ku Bishop Noqhayi no mongameli walesekethe umfundisi uMpuqa no mfundisi uGwaxaza. Ndibulisa kuMambele nefamily yonke yakwa George, izihlobo nezalamane zelikhaya, nabantu bakwaQonqotha nomuntu wonke osibukeleyo nakwamanye amaqonga onxibelelwano molweni. Ndingumfundisi umdingi njengoba ke uChawe secacisile. Ndibone ke into eyenzeke coincidentally oba elicala lefamily nobomi bokuhlala bukatata uChangisa bukhokelwe nguye, kuzothi kwelicala lomoya bukhokelwe ndim. Sobabini singaba seBhofolo. So iBhofolo connection le ikhokela uba uChangisa phaa Raymond Mhlaba. Siyabulela kakhulu. Utata uChangisa kuzawuthetha utata uDipha on behalf of our church. He belonged to 2 organizations phaa ecaweni, the YMG ubeyithanda kakhulu amadodana. Kangoba for a long time he led the YMG, first as a secretary we-Mount Cook Circuit, and then waphinda waba vice president kwakhona eMount Cook Circuit in the YMG. Usweleka ngoku esaphethe i-border region. Onke amadodana ecawa yethu kwi-border region ebekhokelwa nguye coordinator ye-YMG. Also, ndifike eMount Cook ngo-2016 utata George eqala uba ligosa lesekethe, second steward. And I worked with him since 2016 up until ndabe ndiyaphuma kule sekethe seMount Cook nge-20th kaDisemba 2020 yena esesibhedlele. Siphuma ke sobabini, yena uphuma eyolala ukuthula, mna ndiphuma ndanikwa enye indawo. So we have worked together for 5 years second steward apha kule sekethe yethu. Cela ke baphambi koba ndinike uba uDipha nditsho ukuthi Mambele nakubantwana bakho siyanibulela kakhulu ngotata uGeorge, kuba utata uGeorge icawa uyinikile ixesha lakhe nexesha ebengelisebenzise ukuba kunye nani, kodwa ubethi ngamanye amaxesha alikhomithe elo xesha ecaweni. Siyabulela kakhulu, sithemba uba uThixo uza kunithuthuzela. Qinisekile umongameli uyakwandisa lo mbulelo. Siyanithandazela, siyanithandazisa oba uThixo azanidlulise kweli xesha lenhlungu. Phambi koba uba uDipha asondele, utata uGeorge uphantse wandimosha ngento enye. Ube inkokheli enesibindi kakhulu. Utata uGeorge bengelogwala. Wandifundisa ke lonto, phofu efundisa umuntu naye ongelogwala. Qha ndiqonda lento ndithi uphantse wandimosha kuba le influence yakhe of being so courageous, nxa idibana nalena yam bendinayo i-courage, iphantse yagqitha kakhulu. Utata uGeorge was very courageous as a leader. Unyanisile uMEC ubunokuya naye emfazweni utata uGeorge, angasoze akuthengise. Okwesibini, utata uGeorge ubelikholwa lokwenene. Xa ndithi ubelikholwa lokwenene ndithetha ukuthi akhona amakholwa kodwa ambalwa amakholwa okwenene. People onoqiniseka oba naxa bengekho kwi-public view bahlala bengamakholwa, even bekwispace sabo bodwa bahlala bengamakholwa. Bendiye ndimthize ke Mambele ndithi kuye, le ndlela ukholwe ngayo Changisa, ndiyakroka oba banintsi abantu abanzakalisayo kula underground movement, ngoba ngoku indlela omthanda ngayo uThixo nozinikele ngayo kuThixo ingathi ufuna ulungisa izikweliti zonke zela xesha lani kwi-underground movement. Tata George, enye yezinto ubonomjaja ngayo oba ulikholwa was the sincerity of his prayers. Xa ethandaza ubumva uba uncokola nomntu akwi-relationship naye. Uxabisile kakhulu umthandazo, uxabisile kakhulu ukuthetha noThixo. And ngoba bendithetha naye almost every day, bendiyazi oba nasekhayeni lakhe lento yokuthandaza iyinto ayiphilayo. Tata George ubelikholwa lokwenene. He was, as I indicated earlier, he was available and very much committed, dedicated to the life of the church. Izinto ezininzi siziqwayise yena nangona exakekile eba lapha naphaya, kodwa Tata George was available. Enye yezinto tata endingayithetha ba umvoko yobu Tata George was a politician. Nalapha ecaweni, how he operated as a leader, you can tell ubu Tata George is a politician. Ube nazo eza tendencies a politician. But what made Tata George different from other politicians? Endicinga oba mhlawumbi yiyo nale eyenza oba amke ngo-2008 kude kudluleke la period ekuthiwa yi-9 ton years. Kuba uTata George njengoba ndincokola naye as umfundisi wakhe, I know that he returned to the ANC, but wathi uyafuna mfundisi, I want to keep low profile in the ANC, andifuna uyi-announce abantu buyele kwi-ANC. I know but he returned to the ANC. Londo leyo, it was a conversation ebesikunye nayo. uTata George akaswelekanga engelo lungu le-ANC. Kodwa into emenza different oba ibe different breed of a politician is that uTata George bemoyika uThixo. Bemoyika kakhulu uThixo. Kangoba emoyika uThixo, ndiqinisekile okokuba yiyo into ebimbangela bangafuni uassociatewa nabanye abantu abathile. Esibonileyo emveni koba uTata George baprotestayo ePolokwane bona baphuma kanje, oba kutheni nje bangafuni ulandela la nkokheli, kuba sine record yayo yala minyaka. Inkokheli emoyikayo uThixo bingenakuzi associate nabantu abanjalo. Tata George, deep down in his heart, what made him different from the rest of us is his fear of God. He feared God and he loved God so dearly. Ninzi izinto bendinokuzincokola ngayo uba uDipho wazigqibezela ezinye, kodwa nje ezihlekisayo nje nxa ndizicinga uMampele yeyokuba uTata George sisebenzisile i-advantage of his fame apha ecaweni. Nxa siyofuna imali ebantwini ono-business, sitafaka uTata George lo phambili. Tata George yapha la maqabane ngamaqabane akho la ku-ANC asifunela imali. uTata uNoqhayi bakha icawa apha kaQonqotha, there were business people abafaka imali ezinkulu pha ekwakhiweni kwala cawa yalapha eQonqotha because of influence kaTata George. Nam besisebenzisa icheck apha ecaweni, ndiqonde Thixo ndifuna uyotshintsha imali pha etown, i-check lena ngokufuna ndiyokhesha pha ityhu inde pha ebhankini. Ndifowune, nxa ndifowuna i-cellphone ivaliwe, wayendinikile ke mna ndedwa phaya i-landline yakho, ba nxa ndingamfumani kwi-cellphone ndimkhangele ku-landline, ndimfonele ku-landline ke besibizana, bendimbiza mkhulu. Mkhulu, ndisebhankini mani, khawuze mkhulu, ndiyayazi oba sawufika pha ebhankini bulisa wonke umuntu olapha etyhweni lengwefu, bulisa wonke umuntu, ibuze nempilo, sawugqiba singenile lo hlobo siyitsibile ityhu. Everywhere ke apho besifuna i-advantage yefame yakho bayisebenzele, noba kukwamasipala noba kwi-office karhulumente, besiyazi uba masibize uTata George. We had spent a lot of time together eSpur, eWimpy nase-Arches phaa eMetlife Mall. Zindawo zakhe ezo ebeyakuthengela khona ukutya. Nanxa efuna ukulungisa kukho indawo omshiyileyo kuzo, uyakubizela kweza restaurant zintathu hlale phansi kutyiwe akulungise khona. Ndicinga uba zininzi izinto besinozithetha, his discipline, uthanda kwakhe ixesha, zininzi kakhulu izinto ebesinokuzithetha ngaye, how he loved his family. Umambhele emxabisile kakhulu, how he loved sports, church and politics, ikakhulu ANC. uThixo ke makamphumlise ngoxolo omkhulu, sohlala simkhumbula kakhulu mna nonkosikazi wam nabantwana, kuba ngamanye amaxesha bendingabikho, unkosikazi angabikho, ihumility kaTata uGeorge was so huge. He was a person humble ngeyona ndlela. uTata uGeorge ube ndivukela ngamanye amaxesha xa ndingekho nonkosikazi engekho, ayondithathela abantwana bam andisele esikolweni. uTata uGeorge is a huge figure, is a towering figure, but he would be so humble to assist us nonkosikazi wam, oba angade asisele nabantwana esikolweni ngenxa yokuthanda kwakhe icawa yakhe, nokuthanda kwakhe uThixo wakhe, nokuthanda kwakhe umfundisi wakhe. Mambele sikunye nani kule ntlungu, novuyokazi, noziyanda, nozanele, nabanye abantwana benu, abazukulwana benu, uThixo abe kunye nani sisonke. Bawudipha, cela usondele, bawudipha ke uzawudibanisa yonke i-YMG, LPA, noba yiseke steward kaBawuGeorge, bonke ubomi bakhe basecaweni uzawudibanisa bonke in 5 minutes. Emveni koko sizolungiselela ufumana ilizwi.
Bona ise nako wetu uxoleli izono zalo ungathubi ngumbu yakho luze lufusapo. Umphathi nkqubo nabo bonke abantu abangaphakathi emnqubeni molweni, kuphazanyiwe apha phathi nkqubo. uJoel uthethe le nto bendizayithetha. Ingxaki ke ngoku umfundisi lo wakhe ixesha kalichani ncam afike late awugqiba silibazise, and then apenike uTata uGeorge, apenike kakhulu. Ixesha ebelithanda kakhulu, athi besifike early ke thina apha nifika mva nje nalo mfundisi wakho. Ebelixabise kakhulu ixesha uTata uGeorge, kakhulu gqithi. Okwesibini, uTata uGeorge ebene-great sense of generosity. uTata uGeorge ungaba bantu nyhani basemakhaya ebengatyi, umntu wase next door engatyi, and into ayenzayo ebenganqweneli into yoba kuthiwe wena uncedwe nguTata uGeorge, kodwa ebenceda. Baninzi abantu abancedileyo. uTata uGeorge ne-sense of humor kakhulu. Ndizawugqibela ngayo xa ndigqibezela. uTata uGeorge uzowugqama kakhulu phaa ecaweni ngexesha likaTata uGqubule. Wayeyiklasi kaTata uGqubule eyayibaleka kakhulu phaya enkonzweni, elilungu ke lakwaQonqotha Society. Uqhubile ke uTata uGeorge, kwacaca uba ufikile ngoku uTata uGeorge and akasajonga ngasemva. Eyona ndawo ebibaluleke kakhulu ke kuTata uGeorge ebesetshila umfundisi ngamadodana, ebeyiphila inkonzo yamadodana uTata uGeorge. Ukuba kufuneka kuyiwe ehlaselweni, uTata uGeorge selapho ngaphambili apho emahlaselweni. Wasebenza kuTata uGeorge ezibonakalisa uba uyindodana ade amadodana wonyulwa wangunobhala wamadodana esekethe yaseMount Cook. Utata uGeorge ndiyanqumla torhwana andinaxesha ube ngumshumayeli ophuma izandla. Utata uGeorge ube ngumpondo zihlanjiwe apha ebushumayelini, kodwa eyona nto ibibalekile kuyo ngamadodana nangona engumshumayeli utata uGeorge. Ungabashumayeli esithi uba abantu babini ashumayeli utata uGeorge. Ebesinda kuloo society njengee-society zasezilalini ba umnye umntu hayi ke bengashumayeli ebeske athi masithandaze mama, ithanda ngoomama bakhona ecaweni, athandaze utata uGeorge nomama lowo ahambe. Kodwa ukuba babini bawuqhuba bade bayigqibe kungabikho nenye into eshiyekayo kutata uGeorge njengomntu ebezimisele eyothatha isalathiso sakhe. Utata uGeorge ukhulile ke eseketheni, wakhula utata uGeorge. Akhona amaxesha ke eseketheni nikhe nilibale. Utata uGeorge phambi kokuba onyulwe abe ngusosekethe, utata uGeorge ke ebebonakala ba ukhona. Kwacaca uba ikhona into eyenzekayo apha eseketheni, noko sibufeda ukuba sikhuphe iimfuno zasecaweni e-MCO. MCO ke ngu-Methodist Connectional Office. Kubakho iimfuno eziyayo phaya. Kwacaba siyafedalala apha. Utata uGeorge khange onqene ukuba azame udibanisa iintloko ezithile uba isekethe yethu ingakhe ilinge ithathelwe inambari. Bazama ke utata uGeorge, yaphumelela loo nto leyo. Kufika ke ngoku umfundisi uMdingi ngo-2016 kuthiwe ke kudibene abantu aba-arrogant bobabini, umfundisi uMdingi notata uGeorge. Izawuphelela phi le nkonzo lena? Hayi ke baqhuba njengoba besetshile komfundisi, baqhuba ngale minyaka 5 utata uGeorge eligosa lesekethe. Eyona indawo ke ebebalasela kuyo yilena ke yokujonga into yoba kaba besesimbiza igama ngu-MCO, ukuba imali zingenile ecaweni, ukuba imali ka-MCO ayiphumi kuzawufuneka zime ezinye izinto. Eyona nto ibalulekileyo funeka kuqale kuhamba imali yase-MCO. Ebe ngumntu onjalo utata uGeorge. Ndiyavala ke ngoku torhwana kule ndawo ye-sense of humor utata uGeorge ngenye imini, ukuba nantsi le ndawo xolo, utata uGeorge uzawuthi xa ebona uba akusayi enkonzweni athi kuwe ingabe uxabene nanoThixo. Aphinde komnye umntu mhlawumbe bekhe wanqaba enkonzweni abuze uba kwenzeka ntoni ngoku. Athi kaloku wena unguxam. Uxam ke yindawo sisilwanyana esihlala emanzini nasemhlabeni. Athi ngeli xesha wena usahleli phaa emhlabeni siyaqhuba thina apha simanga. Uthi ke utata uGeorge ngenye imini ke ndinemoto ke phaa isentsha shem, yi-Avio, nayibona mos i-Avio shem. Athi mani imoto yakhe yaye kwisevisi. Uthi ndanikwa le nto kadipa, le nto. Uthi ndayiqhuba ndajika phaa ndabuza, nisafuna niqhuba nge-inshorensi yam? Khanindinikeni imoto mani. Iimoto zakhe ke ziiBenz ne. Hayi ke wathi hayi nakukhwela le nto lena ingathi wazanyelwa ke loo Benz leyo. Ndihamba nenye itshomi yam ke uFezile Sonjani. Uthi hayi iweske yakho wena Sonjani, une-Corolla ke noko ibundalana kunale yam. Athi phambi koba ndikhwele kule yakho imoto ndingafowunela zonke ii-inshorensi zam ndizitshekishe into yoba ziserayithi na, andiqondi uba ndingaphila ngongena apha. Kufanele kamfundisi ke, umfundisi unefortuna. Athi hayi suka nawukhwela iCorolla. IToyota andimazi indlela icaphukela ngayo iToyota. Lo mntu wayeneToyota ke wayedla ngophangelisa umama uGeorge esaphangela eBhisho ene-Cressida. Anditsho umama uGeorge andiyazi into endiyicaphukela kangaka iToyota ne. Uthi ke ngoku ndiyayeka ngoku utata, uthi utata uGeorge unomzukulwana, nathi bekhona kwabazukulwana bebelapha lo mzukulwana wakhe, and then I want to see him or her. Uthi tamkhulu, I'm sorry le nto ndizayithetha tamkhulu, your treasurer, ndingutreasurer ke ecaweni, your treasurer is useless. Ndithi tata wayeka esathi umntana ucela uxolo ngomnqandile. Uthi tata mkhulu xa kuzawusayina itsheki kuziwa phaa kuwe noba kuza ukubizwa wena, where is your treasurer? Ndithi kuteni ungaphenduli nje tata? Ndithe kodwa tata uGeorge uyabamosha abantwana. Kodwa ke silahlekele torhwana silibandla laseMount Cook ngutata uGeorge. Silahlekele kakhulu nguTshangisa. Siza kummisisha kakhulu. Ukuza kula mahlaya wakhe ke mfundisi wam kukho la abbreviation ithi RIP. Ithi ke mos rest in peace. Mna benzathi ke kutata uGeorge. Tshangisa, return if possible. Ngosikazi.
Nkosi ke nginkokheli zam ke mama ebendikhokela nazo umfundisi uMpuqa enye le iwileyo bendibiza mkhulu lena igqibothetha ke bendibiza mkhuluwa. Siyabulela kakhulu bawuDipha. Nkosi ke kakhulu phambi koba sithathu siyakudumisa, I would want to affirm ba umkhulu ubedelela kakhulu umkhulu. Bedelela kakhulu umkhulu. La moto yam le ndiyithatha uba yeyona moto iphezulu intle kakhulu, ndiyithembe uba singahamba kuyo. Athi mfundisi ndisuka apha bheke ecuwa ngeCorolla. Ndemkhulu ayoCorolla le iFortuner man, ine-safety features ezirayithi. Angekhe mfundisi, ohlika apho kuloo moto wakho ungene kule Mercedes Benz yam. And uyayicacisa uba iMercedes Benz leya yakhe. Zininzi kakhulu. There was another time I wanted to pay a restaurant kuba wayibizwe ndim phaa erestaurant. Xa efika phaa wathi mfundisi kaloku le mali yakho yile siyiqokelelayo apha. Andinawuvuma uba uphinde undibhatale ngayo le mali. Ndiyabulela kakhulu. We'll remember him, we'll miss him. Siyakudumisa Thixo, siyakuvuma uba unguYehova. Sine kumongameli wesekethe umfundisi uMpuqa athethe nekhaya lakwaGeorge.
Masithandaze egameni likaYise nendodana nomoya oyingcwele, amen. Thixo, andifanelekile noba ndingachola imvuthuluke kwetafuleni yakho, kodwa Nkosi yami ndicela Thixo onamandla onke, ndiyacela Kristu olungileyo, ndiyacela mfele nomvukeli wami wangeli xesha Thixo namandla onke, mandehle mina uphakame wena. Cela Nkosi namandla onke xa ndithetha ndithuthi uThixo, cela Kristu inhliziyo eguqukayo, cela Mesiya olungileyo ungandiyekeleli Thixo wam, ngoba nakuyekelelwa nguwe ndophalala njengamanzi. Cela ezi zinto ngoKristu Nkosi manje kusebenza naphakade, amen. Ngokusithoba okukhulu mandibulise ekhayeni lakwaTshangisa, ekhayeni mabhelekazi, bulise kakhulu kuwe bhelekazi nabantwana, uzanele abakhwenyana babo nabazukulu bonke. Ndibulise kubuholi becawa, bulise kuBishop Noqayi, bafundisi bonke abakhoyo, izihlalo zonke zecawa, ndibulise go-MCs bam bobabini, ndiyabulisa kakhulu. Ndibulise more especially to our MEC, to the leadership of the province and the regional leadership. MEC Ubawomvoko, we're honored to have you amongst us, sir. Thank you. Ilizwi endizawuthi ndithuthuzele ikhaya lakwaba uGeorge nezihlobo nezalamani, odade bawo, nodade nabafowabo, nabantwana bonke, and everybody, and all the mourners, nabantu basecaweni, and baziwa abalahlekelwe nabo. Sizalufumana kwincwadi kaTimothy wesibini, sasihluko sesesine, ivesi esizoyifunda ivesi ka-6, 7, and 8, efundeka ngolu hlobo. Kuba mna sendithululwa ngokomnikelo, nalo ixesha lokunduluka kwam likufuphi. Athi umpostoli Pawulos umzamo omuhle ndiwuzamile, athi ugqatso ndilufezile, athi ukholo ndilugcinile, athi okokugqibela, ndibekele isithaba sobulungisa eyakundibuyisela ngaso ngaloo mini Nkosi umgwebi olilungisa, athi ngabi ndimndedwa, ibe ngabo bonke abakuthandayo ukubonakala kwayo. Ingabi ndimndedwa, kodwa ibe ngabo bonke abakuthandayo ukubonakala kwayo. George, ndiyabulela George, to be introduced to you. I just met him for 3 days. Ndiyabulisa kubantu abasekhaya, andinilibalanga, everybody who's there. Ndiyabulisa kakhulu kini. I only met him for 3 days. Kodwa ingathi kudala ndamazi. And ndiyangqina zonke izinto zithethwe ngaye namhlanje zizinto that he was in the 3 days. Ebendinaye, I could see all those things. Wayenxibe ngalolaa hlobo, nala bag yakhe ndiyayazi, nale ndaba yakwaSpare yokuyobhatala kwaSpare ukuthi hayi kaloku ninanayo imali eningabhatala ngayo apha, wena choose nje ubofuna ukuyotya kweyiphi restaurant qha into ongayenza irole yakho. So I've known him as a very loving person. I was looking forward to working with him. He was ngenene nangenyaniso a very transformative person. He was a pioneer in everything. Ngoba he was able, during his time, it will go down. But during his time, in Mount Coke, for the very first time, had a female, a woman, superintendent. Something that has never happened before. It was during his time. As most of the people in circuits in the churches have already said, God, he was part of the delegation that said yes to that. He was a transformative man. If I was to write a book about George, my book would be entitled God, Family, Politics, and Sport, because that would capture him. Kodwa njengeculo laseMawisile elitho waqala semncincane ukumkhonza uThixo wakhe, athi uyavuya ngokwenze njalo ulungile yena, athi ngoba uzawusinda kwinkathazo eziningi zasemhlabeni. Ngifuna ukuthetha ngengombona ezine njengoba ngimbekile. I want to talk about dependence. Xa ungumuntu, we have got 4 seasons. And the first one being dependence. Uthembe, uxhomekeke ebantwini. Uxhomekeke ebantwini babakutyise when we are born. Bakutyise, bakunxibise, bakuvase, and listen to your whims and try to think uba ukhalelani ngokolisana. Ukhalela utyile, uhluthi, uvasile, uchangile nenapkin. So we have done everything we can. That's the first season. Bese uba ne season ye interdependence.
And that is the season when you learn, you are formed. Apostle Paulos, that I can find no other figure in the Bible to liken to UMG except the Apostle Paulos, who was formed by Gamaliel. Who is he? He knows everything, circumcised at the 7th day. After 7 days, we have got those seasons. He was formed as a politician. Ufundisiwe waqeqeshwa wenza zonke watestwa wenza yonke into ekufanele ukuthi makayenze. And then you come to independence, where you make your own decisions. And when you do that, Solomon, the king, the writer yencwadi yomshumayeli, the Ecclesiastes, othi everything is useless. Uthetha umuntu who had everything, umuntu who had all the money to entertain every whim he had. He was everything. He was an artist. He was an agriculturist. He was an entertainer. He was even a farmer, breeding his own cattle, doing yonke into under the sun. What uthi ka esebhala incwadi yakhe uqala ngokuthi everything oyenzayo is just useless. It's chasing after the wind. And that's the season of uzaphuma ku-interdependence, uzongena ku-independence. What makes the difference? How do you move from interdependence to dependency? With King Solomon, this is what happened. Uthe esayibonile yonke lento ukuthi nje. The problem with him was that ezenza zonke ezizinto, he was not finding fulfillment. There was an emptiness in him that he could not account for. His life was filled but not fulfilled. And the reason was his telescopic view of life. He viewed life from one direction. He viewed life as life apha kulo mhlaba. He viewed impilo yalapha kulo mhlaba. He viewed life as a space zonke izinto xa zenzeka before you die. He did not view life from the heavenly perspective. He did not see the afterlife. Eyonanto ekwenza ukuba the way you live shows ukuthi uyazazi uba you are just passing by. Elona khaya lakho lelu umji akulo namhlanje. When you change your perspective, you begin to do things differently. You begin to be a different politician. You begin to be a different Christian. Once you begin to think of things, ngaloo ndlela uSolomon ayibona, and leyo nto, it brings the remembrance of who God is empilweni yakho. God is the creator of heaven and earth. God is your creator, and he created you in his own image, in God's own image. And that is when you begin to respect every person, omncane nomkhulu. And secondly, it's the fear of God. Uyazi uthi Solomon mayekhuluma kahle athi yonke into under the sun goes back to God. And I know that everything that happens in this world happens at the time that God chooses. And nobody can add anything on what God has done. And nobody can take away anything from what God has done. I'm imagining God's conversation noba uGeorge kulambhedo wasesibhedlela. And I'm imagining him, looking at him, and knowing that his time is up. And I'm imagining Timmy saying, Umzamo muhle, dozamule. We've listened to everything that has been said. I'm imagining eti uqhatso ndolufezile. And I'm imagining njengompostoli Paulus athi ukholo ndiliqinile. Athi to some I was a maverick, to others I was a hero, To some, I was just useless. To others, I was even a traitor. Kwabanye, they didn't even understand what I stood for. But and everything that I did was for my children. And this moment is the moment of passing on the baton. And this is what I'm doing. Passing the baton is the critical moment in anyone's life. Njenge teacher ye sport. When you pass on the baton, and when the baton is not passed on correctly, things do not fall into place. The center does not hold. When you pass on the baton, it determines the person who receives the baton. Is he interdependent? Is he independent? And can he begin his own legacy? When you receive the baton, you receive it with your left-hand side. And some will run with it. But the correct way is to receive it with your left-hand side. And then you put it to your right-hand side. And that says, now I am creating my own legacy. I am creating the legacy that God has given me. I am living the life that God has created for me. I am doing things that people will talk about me. And I am living a legacy that will never die. Your father has left you a legacy. Your father has left everything, has done everything. He has left you the legacy. It's upon you to take the legacy forward by rewriting the history of Machangisa and doing what he has taught you. Put into practice what he has taught you. We hear things, we listen to things, we do things, God, we never do. Your father was a doer. Take the right baton and run with it, and we will be cheering you on and saying, yes, yes, abantwana bakhe laba. Kholo ndiluqinile. Don't ever let go of the hope of things ezingabonwayo, because that is what faith is. Gcinani ukholo, gcinani uThixo, nimazi, because even this book kaSolomon, which has opened my eyes in a new way, leyo ncwadi leyo asishiyisize, because thina siyazi ukuthi ukhona uKristu wamadinga, ukhona uThixo ongabheki ukuthi unobutyebi obungakanani, obona butyebi bufuna uThixo, bubutyebi bemisebenzi emihle. Umpostoli Paulos akhuluma ngayo kwincwadi yama-Efesi athi we were created to do good things in Jesus Christ. Your father